I would like to thank the members of the Committee of the Ibero-American Congress on Qualitative Research the opportunity of presenting this paper on teaching methodologies and assessment on higher education, the centrality of students. The authors of this paper are Susana Oliveira Sá and Maria Palmira Alves from University of Minho, in Braga, and António Pedro Costa from University of Aveiro, in Portugal. Methods of teaching centered on learning. This unitary perspective, as well as the interaction between the domains of teaching, learning, and evaluation, changes the more traditional methods of the organization of teaching centered on the teacher, and the methods of evaluating learning centered on the summative and punctual product. It changes then to other methods that are subordinated to the participation of the students into all the phases of the teaching, learning, and evaluation process. Hence, the emphasis placed on the participation of the student and in the unit of teaching, learning, and evaluation orientates the methodological options of the teacher to the active methods that involve students in activities that foster significant learning. Furthermore, through the use of systematic, formative, and integrative evaluation methods with permanent access to feedback, both students and teachers are made responsible for the improvement of learning. The change of the traditional methods of teaching centered on the teacher to methods of teaching more centered on the student, and the conviction that students build meanings rather than receive knowledge from the teacher, alter the emphasis of the content of the processes. These have obvious consequences to the practical level of teaching, learning, and evaluation, as well as to all the other structural elements of the curriculum. In regards to the underlying principles and assumptions of the methodologies centered on learning, also known as active methodologies, we can say that it is a set of teaching and learning strategies that assume an active involvement by students in the acquisition of knowledge, skills, and attitudes. In other words, making them do things and to think about the things they are learning. In this context, learning is seen as a dynamic process in which a student actively participates in the analysis, understanding, discussion, and reflection of one or more activities. In fact, it is in the involvement of the student in the learning process that the best characterizes these types of strategies. As Prince states, active learning is generally defined as any instructional method that engages students in the learning process. The core element of active learning are student activity and engagement in the learning process. By proposing and utilizing active learning strategies, the teacher recognizes that he or she will have to allow the students to be involved in their own learning. That is, he or she will have to encourage them to assume more responsibility for their own learning. In this context, the role of the teacher in the classroom will be to speak less and to facilitate immersion in the subject concept that the student will have to learn with his or her peers. Formative assessment. Formative assessment stands out due to the regulation of pedagogic performance. As such, it is fundamentally concerned with procedures rather than results. It is an assessment that seeks pedagogic regulation, risk management, and the consolidation of achievements. Formative assessment allows teachers to follow students' learning, helping them in their schooling. It is a type of assessment based on dialogue, whose objective is the constant readjustment of the teaching and learning processes. It demands a lot of involvement from the teacher, as it demands an availability of time that goes beyond that which is given during class. This is because in between activities it becomes necessary to build a register about each student, and then it becomes further necessary to update this register as new data emerges. As such, it is primordial to plan on a daily basis the activities that will be developed by students and to elaborate upon individualized strategies. Consensus is the goal. If it is not possible to achieve, the teacher ought to expose him or herself to contradictory or distinct views in order to clarify them. In any case, assessment in this model is a participative, collaborative, interactive, and negotiating process. In the educational process, efficient feedback given through comments to the student about his or her work allow him or her to regulate their own learning. As this is the result of the interaction with the outside world and of some of the feedback received of that interaction. Beyond its own objective, the specific value of formative assessment with recourse to feedback lies in the changing of relevant aspects like the student-teacher or student-student interaction, self-regulation, and self-assessment. Integrating feedback in the activities of teaching learning is like a dialogue between the teacher and the student, or between the student and his or her peers, that looks towards readjustment and improvement of those same activities. Research questions. How do students and teachers think about what happens in learning? In what way is feedback used in the classroom by teachers and students? We have observed 12 hours of classes, attended by 70 students, and it had a 100% approval rating. The table supporting the observation of the classes was adapted to dimension of the Avina project. We held a semi-structured interview with the teacher, as well as a focus group interview with 5 students. The content of these interviews was recorded, transcribed ipsis verbis. Content analysis, reading of data codification, and subsequent categorization were carried out by using the qualificative research software webQDA. The codification and the intra-codification carried out with an interval of 2 months had a 0.62 reliability index, which is to be expected. The intercodification of the data was carried out by 2 external investigators and had a 0.77 and a 0.65 reliability index. Categories, indicators, and definitions. A presentation and a discussion of the results obtained will follow, with generic inferences being made from a reading of the results presented in metrics. These pertain to the questioning for each category and to the codifications relative to the teacher and to the student. In turn, triangulating the data from the observed classes with the data gathered by the interviews. We will be using the term references as being the units of register that can be the sentence or group of words that make sense and have meaning. In Table 2, we present the matrix pertaining to the category Learning Perceptions. From Table 2, we can see that there are no references to the indicator active learning in the student's narrative when answering the interview question. In your opinion, what factors were the most instrumental to learning in this curriculum unit? Why? This might indicate that students are unaware of the concept or of the meaning of learning, since they mostly answered good grades summaries. In contrast, the teacher shows references to active learning when talking to the class. For example, the students will now present the hydrophobic part in a class discussion. I want you to, in groups, prepare an abstract about the behavior of the organelles in acid. Furthermore, the teacher understands that his or her student should learn with their peers. If we are speaking about a given topic and I think that they are not understanding me, but I notice a student shaking his head affirmatively, I say the following. Look, tell your colleague over there what you thought, what you understood, as he might understand you better than me. Students agree that they learn with their peers. We understood it better when our colleagues explain it, or sometimes we explain it to our colleagues. Table 3 is the matrix regarding the nature of feedback category. An analysis of Table 3 tells us that the feedback on assessment is essentially oral and informal. This was referenced both by the teacher and the student. This is how it is, but does that make sense to you? Explain to me what you wanted to say and how it makes sense in your head. Yes, we help each other a lot. There were a lot of tips that we would give each other, more so to the colleagues in our group. It is worth noting that formal and written feedback was only mentioned once by either student and teacher. I give written feedback as the student won't be able to know what is wrong if he doesn't have feedback of what is wrong. If he does something wrong and is unaware why he did it wrong, I don't think it is very useful. We would write a report on what we thought of the work of our group of colleagues. Table 4's matrix pertains to the distribution of feedback category. An analysis of Table 4 shows that the distribution of feedback in the assessment of both classroom and out of classroom emerges in the teacher's speech. In classroom activities, the teacher would refer to debates or to presentations in the class as very complete, very clear structure, and very well thought through. Very enlightening work, very clear, even though he or she never registered these in any assessment table in the classroom. In regard to out-of-class activities, an example of the teacher's narrative is, therefore, feedback is given in a timely manner to all the assignments in 1 week. I go over all of their assignments, not of all of the students, but of all the groups. In regard to the students' narratives to classroom activities, they said the following. Maybe the professor was evaluating our work in class when referring to out-of-class activities. The student said that we sent that, which he did for the professor to have a look. The strategic guidance of teaching centered on the student implied for the teacher a responsibility to promote learning environments that are diversified, flexible, and susceptible to value the student's participation in all the steps of the process. This includes tasks and activities that develop cognitive competencies of a superior level. As such, learning with one's peers revealed itself to have the potential to foster participation and improve students' learning by promoting their centrality. This has the potential to be more fruitful as long as accompanied by efficient methods of formative assessment and monitoring of this process. This materialized in the expression of an action or sets of actions that the student developed to improve his or her learning likes, an equivalent action on behalf of the teacher. We do not consider the feedback given in class as being a form of formative assessment, thus preventing its effectiveness. When materialized by an effective, timely, and constant feedback, formative assessment between students and between teacher-student, be it in classroom or out of classroom activities, oral and informal or formal and written, have an implication on learning which allow the student to correct mistakes and address issues throughout the entire teaching process. These results reveal that in similar contexts, the contribution of the teacher to the centrality of students in activities that foster significant learning in teaching learning evaluation strategies, where the evaluation is systematic, formative, and integrated in the process with recourse to permanent feedback, is susceptible to make teachers and students responsible to improve learning. This then brings advantages in motivation, self-regulation, and in the development of critical thought, consequently developing cognitive competencies of a superior level. Thank you for your attention. Any questions or doubts you would like to make, feel free to do it, and we thank you those questions beforehand. We are going to answer them immediately through our emails.